I inherited my grandfather's cabin in the remote forests of Kentucky, a structure that had been standing for over 70 years. The place was far from the nearest paved road, tucked deep among towering oaks and dense thickets, where the world felt muted. No cell signal, no power lines, just the smell of pine and the constant whisper of wind through the leaves. For me, it was supposed to be a retreat, a place to escape the noise of my life and clear my head. For the first week, it felt just like that. I spent my days repairing the porch, splitting wood, and walking the game trails my grandfather once followed. The air was crisp, tinged with the earthy scent of wet soil and old moss. Nights were colder than I expected, silent except for the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant rustle of a deer. On my second week, while wandering behind the property line, I found it, a stone well, half hidden by overgrown weeds and twisted roots. The circular mouth was lined with weathered gray stones, slick with moss. A rusted grate, corroded with age, sealed the opening, secured by heavy chains that rattled faintly in the wind. The metal smelled of iron and rain.
Curiosity got the better of me. My grandfather had never mentioned a well. I wondered if it had been part of some old homestead or an abandoned water source. I went back to the cabin for my tools. The chains were brittle, flakes of rust snapping off with every strike. When the final link gave way, the grate groaned as I lifted it. The hinges screamed in protest. Below, nothing. Not darkness like shadow, but darkness that seemed to absorb light. I pulled a flashlight from my belt and shined it down. The beam vanished, swallowed whole, as if the well itself rejected it. I leaned closer, listening. No drip of water, no echo. Just silence, thick and unnatural. I dropped a stone, counted seconds. 10, 20, 30. No impact. No sound. That night, I dreamed. In the dream, I was lying in bed, the cabin dark, the air so cold it burned to breathe. From somewhere distant, I heard the chains of the grate clinking, slowly, methodically. I rose, against my will, and walked to the window. Through the trees, I saw movement, a shape, pale and thin, climbing out of the well. Its limbs were too long, joints bending wrong. Its face, if you could call it that, was smooth, featureless, except for where the eyes should have been. Hollow sockets, weeping black. I woke up drenched in sweat. The room smelled faintly metallic, like old blood. My pulse was a drum in my ears. I tried to laugh it off, a nightmare brought on by isolation. Until I went outside. The grate was open. The chains, broken again, lay scattered on the ground. I forced myself to close it, securing it this time with heavy rope and a padlock I found in my grandfather's shed. The wood of the rope burned my hands as I tied it, but I didn't care. I told myself it was animals, vandalism, anything human. The following night, the same dream returned, the same figure, climbing, closer now, its head turning unnaturally toward where I stood in the dream, as if it could see me despite the absence of eyes. At dawn, I found the grate open again. The rope had been unwound, not cut, not frayed, but carefully unwound, coiled neatly beside the stones. On the third night, I set up my motion-activated trail camera, positioning it on a tree facing the well. I didn't sleep, just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the cabin boards making my heart skip. At 3:12 a.m., the alarm on the camera pinged.
I forced myself to wait until morning before checking the footage. The sun felt weak, offering no comfort. My hands shook as I slotted the SD card into my laptop. The video showed the well. The woods around it were still, the fog rolling low across the ground. Then movement. From the black mouth of the well, a hand emerged. Pale, thin, fingers impossibly long, each tipped with dark, cracked nails. It gripped a grate and without effort lifted it aside, as if it weighed nothing. Another hand followed, then a shoulder. The figure began to rise, but the video cut to static before more could be seen. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I left the cabin that morning with only what I could carry, abandoning everything else to the woods. But as I drove, every mile felt heavier, the trees outside bending in ways they hadn't before, as though leaning closer to watch me go. That night, I stayed in a roadside motel miles from the property. When I turned on the faucet to wash my face, the water ran black for a moment, thick as ink, carrying the faint smell of rust and earth. Beneath the motel floor, I swore I heard a distant drip echoing upward, slow and steady. I never returned to Kentucky, and I tell myself I escaped. But sometimes, even far away, I find damp soil beneath my shoes in the morning and faint chain marks beside my bed, as though something has been there, patient, waiting for me to open a door I can't see yet.
Every fall I retreat into the Sierra Nevada, where the air is thin and sharp and the world feels raw and untouched. I hike solo, a ritual to shake off the year's weight. 5 nights, no cell signal, no other voices but the wind and my own breathing. I know how to handle solitude, how to make a campfire my only companion. But there was one trip that didn't feel like solitude. It felt like something else had found me. That year I took a trail that hadn't been maintained for years. A thin vein of earth winding through sprawling pines and jagged granite faces, following a dry creek bed that hadn't seen water in decades. Each day I trekked deeper, my boots finding purchase on moss-licked stones and brittle needles. Each night the forest closed in tighter, shadows stretching long and strange beneath the crescent moon. On the 3rd night, I pitched my tent beside the creek bed, the air heavy with the resinous scent of pine and the distant cry of coyotes. My fire burned low, embers whispering against the cold. I sat wrapped in my sleeping bag, listening to the stillness. Then I saw them.
Faint at first, small pinpricks of red between the trees, like coals floating in midair. They moved in slow arcs, swaying left and right as if suspended from unseen hands. Red lanterns, each glowing with a dim, steady light that pulsed in a rhythm too deliberate to be wind, too controlled to be fireflies. I switched off my headlamp, holding my breath as the darkness swallowed me. The only light was the faint crimson glow weaving through the forest. They weren't hikers, too quiet. No crunch of leaves, no snapping twigs, just the soft hum of their movement. Then came the voices, low, guttural chanting carrying through the cold air in a language I couldn't place. The syllables rose and fell in a cadence that made the hair on my neck prickle, something primal stirring in the sound. My pulse thudded in my ears as the lights drifted closer, their glow brushing against the trunks and needles. 30 feet, maybe less. Through the faint red haze, I could see shadows between the lanterns, figures moving with an unnatural grace, their outlines blurred by the dark. None of them spoke beyond the chant. None of them turned toward my tent. Yet, I felt seen, like every breath I took was counted. I stayed as still as the rocks beneath me,
I didn't dare make a sound. The lights passed by, weaving between the pines, their chanting fading as he melted into the forest beyond. When the silence returned, it was deeper than before. My fire had burned out entirely, leaving me in the dark, the cold suddenly heavier. I sat awake the rest of the night, clutching the handle of my knife, though I knew it would do nothing. At dawn, the forest looked the same as any other morning, sun spilling gold through the branches, but when I stepped out of my tent, I saw them. A circle of blackened ash in the dry creek bed, as if something had burned there without leaving a trace of wood or fuel. Around me, dangling from branches by frayed twine, were dozens of small dolls, handmade from sticks, moss, and tufts of animal hair. Each one had a red smear painted where the eyes should be. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't break camp properly. I threw everything into my pack and started walking. 17 miles felt like a dream I never finished. At some point, my steps slowed as the distant chanting threaded through the pines again, soft and lulling. My pack slipped from my shoulders as my feet turned off the trail, unbidden, toward the lingering red glow between the trees. The voices swelled until I no longer felt fear, only a heavy calm as the lanterns drifted closer. The next thing I remember is waking at dusk, surrounded by those dolls hanging above me, the circle of ash beneath my feet still warm, the red smears on their faces now painted across my own hands.
Seasonal work has a way of putting you in places that feel forgotten by the rest of the world. For years, I chased gigs that kept me off-grid, resorts at the edge of nowhere, fire lookouts perched atop lonely peaks, summer camps you could only reach by a single dirt road. It was supposed to be about quiet, about escape, but there was one job in the mountains of Idaho that showed me some places aren't just quiet, they're wrong. The camp was small, a scattering of log cabins around a still lake, hemmed in by endless pines. The only road in or out was a rutted gravel stretch that wound down the mountainside for miles before meeting pavement. Nights were so silent there, even the wind seemed reluctant to stir the trees. My shifts were long, but I didn't mind. Until one night, I learned that silence doesn't always mean safety. It was close to midnight when I finished locking up the main cabin. The moon was high, casting pale light across the gravel lot. That's when I saw them, headlights, far down the road, weaving slowly through the bends. No one came up that late, not without calling first. We didn't get casual visitors, especially not at that hour. I stood at the gate, watching as the vehicle drew closer. An old truck, its engine humming low. It stopped just short of the gate, idling for a moment before cutting off. The headlights died, leaving only the sound of cooling metal in the night air. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He didn't speak, didn't move toward me, just stood by the truck, watching. I lifted a hand and waved, calling out to ask if he was lost, if he needed help. No response, not a word. The moonlight caught his face just enough for me to see that his expression didn't change. Not confused, not angry, just vacant. Then, without a sound, he turned away from the road and walked straight into the woods. No flashlight, no gear, just his dark figure slipping between the trees like water. I waited, expecting to see the beam of a light, to hear footsteps, branches snapping. Nothing. The forest swallowed him whole. I retreated to the security office and pulled up the cameras, focusing on the lot and the road. The truck was still there, parked in the same spot, the gate closed behind it, untouched. I kept watching, waiting for the man to return. An hour passed, then 2, The truck never moved, and he never came out. At dawn, I stepped outside. The truck was gone. Relief hit me until I looked closer. The gravel told a different story. Tire tracks led into the lot from the road, but there were none leading out. It was as if the truck had simply vanished, swallowed by the earth itself. Back inside, I checked the camera footage again, scrolling through every minute of the night. But where the truck had been, where the man had walked, the recording showed nothing but static. No headlights, no figure, just a grainy, snow-filled screen, as though something had chewed through the feed the moment they arrived. I left that job early. When people ask why, I tell them I wanted something closer to town, somewhere with neighbors and streetlights. But the truth is simpler. I couldn't stand working a place where things arrive but never leave, and where sometimes the cameras see less than your own eyes.
3 years ago, I made a decision that altered the course of my life, one that many would consider reckless, but for me it was a chance to escape the relentless noise of modern life. I bought an old RV, a battered yet sturdy machine that had seen better days, but still had a heartbeat. Its faded paint and creaking hinges were a promise of freedom. The open road called me like a siren, and I answered without hesitation. I chose to live on the road, to shed the trappings of a fixed address and embrace the endless horizon. At first, it was exhilarating, freedom like I'd never known. But soon enough, I found my favorite spot, a remote stretch of desert in New Mexico. It was an expanse so vast and flat that the sky felt like an ocean overhead, stars scattered like glitter on a black canvas. The silence was profound. No humming electricity, no distant traffic, no voices. Just the wind, the dust, and the vast nothingness. I parked my RV there, on a patch of dry earth bordered by sagebrush and brittle grasses. The nights were cold, the days scorching. There was no cell service, no internet, no distractions, just me and the desert. I took comfort in that emptiness. On the first night, I was lulled to sleep by the wind's whisper and the vastness around me. The stars overhead were bright, too numerous to count. I remember feeling small and oddly peaceful. But on the second night, something caught my eye. A faint glow on the horizon, a warm, steady light that didn't blink or flicker. At first, I thought maybe another traveler had parked nearby. Maybe someone else had found this secluded spot like I had. But when dawn broke, I was alone. No tracks in the dirt, no other vehicles, no signs of life. The next night, the light appeared again, closer now. It didn't move like a car's headlights or the erratic beam of a flashlight. It was steady, like an old lantern burning just beyond the edge of sight. Curious, I stepped outside the RV and scanned the horizon. Nothing. No fire, no campfire smoke, no other campers. Just a wide open desert under the cold moonlight. That's when I noticed something odd. The light wasn't casting shadows the way a distant glow should. Instead, there was a faint shadow behind my RV, as though the light source was coming from my own roof. Puzzled, I climbed up to the rooftop ladder. My fingers gripped the metal tightly as I pulled myself onto the roof under the chilly night sky. But there was nothing there. No lantern, no light source, just the battered metal and the faint scratch marks from years of travel. Still, the ground around the RV glowed softly, a pale blue-white haze that seemed to ripple like heat waves in the desert air. I rubbed my eyes, telling myself it must be a trick of the light or my imagination playing games. But each night after that, the light came closer. It never blinked or swayed, just a constant, steady glow that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. One night, I woke up to find the glow right outside my window. My heart raced as I peered through the glass. There, reflected in the pane, was the face staring back at me. But it wasn't a stranger. It was my own. Eyes wide, pale in the moonlight, staring with a hollow expression I didn't recognize. I blinked and leaned closer, but the reflection didn't change. The face remained there, still, silent, and utterly alien.
Fear surged through me like cold water. I grabbed my keys and fled into the night, leaving the RV and everything behind. But even as I put miles between myself and that desert patch, the memory of the borrowed light lingered, haunting me with its strange, silent promise. It wasn't just a light anymore. It was something else, something waiting to be understood. And somehow I knew I would never truly escape it. The days that followed were a strange mix of unease and fascination. Despite the creeping sense of dread, I couldn't bring myself to leave that desert patch. There was something hypnotic about the glow, as if it held some unspoken promise or perhaps a secret waiting to be revealed. Each night, I found myself drawn outside just before the sun dipped below the horizon, eager and anxious to see the light again. It always appeared like clockwork, soft, warm, steady, just on the edge of vision. I tried everything to track it, walking the perimeter of my campsite, scanning the endless flatness with binoculars, even setting up my old DSLR on a tripod to capture long exposures. Nothing. The photos showed only empty desert, stars, and the faintest hint of a glow that I could have sworn wasn't there when I took the picture. The glow didn't behave like a normal light. It didn't reflect off rocks or plants. It was as if the light itself was an entity, moving with purpose, bending reality in small ways. One evening, as I sat outside the RV, sipping lukewarm coffee, the wind shifted suddenly. A chill ran down my spine, as the air around me seemed to grow heavier. The glow appeared closer than ever before, almost at the edge of the clearing. I saw it pulse once, twice, like a heartbeat. Then slowly, the glow began to coalesce, forming into a shape, vague at first, like smoke or mist, but gradually more defined. A figure emerged, shimmering with light, translucent, but undeniably human in shape. It was not threatening. It moved with grace, floating rather than walking, the light that made it seeming borrowed from some otherworldly source. Its face was obscured, but I sensed an intelligence, a quiet sadness in its presence. I wanted to speak, to ask who or what it was, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, the figure extended a hand, and the glow spread from it in tendrils, wrapping around me gently like a warm breeze. Suddenly, I felt weightless, as if my body was no longer tethered to the earth. The desert faded away. The stars grew impossibly bright, and the horizon bent in impossible angles. I was no longer in the dry, dusty desert, but somewhere between worlds, caught in a realm of borrowed light and shadow. The figure whispered, though no sound reached my ears, a message conveyed directly to my mind. You have walked the line between the known and the unknown. This place is not a trap, but a gateway. We are the keepers of the light, guardians of forgotten places where time folds and reality thins. You saw us because you were ready. Fear ebbed away, replaced by awe and a strange comfort. Stay, the figure said, and walk with us beyond the veil, or return, carrying the light within you, forever changed. I hesitated. The pull of the unknown was strong, but so was the life I left behind. Before I could answer, the figure dissolved into 1,000 sparks, which swirled around me and sank into my skin like liquid fire. When I opened my eyes, I was back inside the RV. The glow was gone, and the desert was silent again. But I was not the same.
In the days that followed, I noticed strange things. My shadow moved independently in the moonlight, flickering with a light of its own. At night, my dreams were vivid journeys through star fields and ancient ruins lost to time. And sometimes, when the desert wind blew just right, I could see faint glimmers of that borrowed light, calling me back, whispering promises of mysteries yet to unfold. I never returned to that spot, but the light never truly left me. It has become a part of me, an eternal flickering flame, guiding me through the darkness of the ordinary world, a reminder that sometimes the brightest light is borrowed from places beyond our understanding.
My partner, Jamie, and I decided to take a sabbatical from city life, a pause from the endless noise, screens, deadlines, and crowds. We craved something different, something raw and untouched. So, after months of searching, we found a cabin deep in the Ozarks. It was a simple structure, off-grid, solar-powered, and designed to live completely self-sufficiently. Rainwater catchment systems, a composting toilet, wood stove for heat, the works. The kind of place where the only interruptions were the wind through the trees and the occasional deer wandering by. The first few weeks were idyllic. The Ozarks were alive with life. The smell of pine, the rustle of leaves, the chorus of crickets at dusk. Jamie took to gardening, coaxing stubborn vegetables from rocky soil, while I lost myself in writing and sketching in the quiet. The nights were breathtaking. Without city lights, the stars poured down like water, so bright they almost felt touchable. At first, the only sound we paid much attention to was the natural one, the wind, the calls of distant owls, the splash of a stream nearby. And then the echoes began.
We noticed them first on a whim, shouting into the valley from our porch, hearing our words bounce back from the canyon walls. "Hello!" I yelled one afternoon. A second later, "Hello!" returned exactly, perfectly. It was simple, harmless fun. Jamie and I would laugh and repeat phrases, testing the echo's limits. "Jamie rocks!" I called. "Jamie rocks!" came back. But after a few days, the echoes started to shift. They didn't always match exactly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in bruised purples and gold, Jamie shouted from the porch, "Dinner's ready!" I was in the kitchen, stirring something, when I heard it. The echo returned, but not with my words. "I'm not hungry." I froze. My spoon clattered against the pot. Jamie was silent on the porch. Then slowly, I heard him say, "Did you hear that?" We exchanged looks, eyes wide. For a moment, the forest around us held its breath. From that night on, the echoes weren't just echoes. They were replies. We started trying to talk back. "Who's there?" Jamie asked one night, voice low and cautious. "Closer than you think," came the reply. We set up recorders around the property, hoping to catch whatever was making the sounds. We sat in silence, headphones on, listening to the long hours of recordings. Hours passed with only the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of night birds. But when Jamie or I were alone, the replies started. Sometimes they were cryptic. "Why do you listen?" "Because you listen."
leave before it's too late. Other times, more unsettling. You brought us here. We watch. We wait. When friends visited, the voices stopped. No replies, no odd echoes. It was just us.
Days passed, and the nights grew heavier. The forest seemed to press in closer. I started to feel watched, a prickling at the back of my neck whenever I stepped outside after dark. Jamie's smile grew tight. Our easy laughter faded. We argued about leaving, but neither of us wanted to admit how scared we'd become. One night, Jamie whispered, "We have to ask it something." I nodded. We sat together on the porch, the recorders running. I asked into the gathering dark, "Why us?" The reply came swift and clear. "Because you listened." It was a sentence that settled over us like a shroud. That final night, sleep was impossible. The cabin was still but alive with invisible tension. We sat shoulder to shoulder on the porch, waiting for the voices to come. When they did, the words felt different, urgent, almost pleading. "Don't forget. Remember us. Don't leave." But the morning sun broke through the trees and chased the shadows away. We packed up the next day. We moved back to the city the following week. The cabin remains, deep in the woods. And though we haven't gone back, sometimes when I'm alone and it's quiet, I swear I hear an echo. After we returned to the city, we both decided not to leave the experience hanging unanswered. We wanted to understand what those replying echoes really were and where they came from. At first, we started gathering information about the area where we had stayed in the woods. We researched the history of that land and discovered that it used to be the site of a small village that had been abandoned decades ago. Records showed that over the years, strange events had occurred in those forests, disappearances of villagers, and reports of eerie sounds heard from afar. We also reached out to people living in nearby communities. Some shared stories passed down by word of mouth about echoes or voices that answered from deep within the woods. Some believed these were the voices of ancestors who had not yet passed on, while others thought they might be warnings of something unknown.
Thanks for listening. Stay safe and don't wander too far off the grid.